Today's show is sponsored by ExpressVPN, one-click protection for all your devices. Securing yourself could not be easier. Visit expressvpn.com/funhaus.
Welcome, everybody, to Filmhaus. We are the luckiest, probably, generation of all time, and that is because we get 2 Suicide Squads. That's right. You thought back in 2016 that you'd only ever get 1, but no, we get 2. We are actually going to be reviewing The Suicide Squad 2021, James Gunn's film, this week on Filmhaus, and I have 2 amazing guests to do it with me. Come on out, Elise Willems and Marcus Turner.
Hey.
Hello.
Elise Willems, you of course know from Funhaus and Filmhaus and basically this show every single week. Marcus Turner, you thank you for coming back and joining us again.
Thank you for having me.
From the Cosmonaut Variety Hour. It's an amazing channel. If you love movies, I mean, honestly, if you love a lot of media, because I feel like sometimes you even cover other things too. Just a super fun, good way for people like me who want to get good film criticism in a really, bite-sized isn't right, because some of your videos are a little long, but either way. 7 minutes. It's comedy, it's criticism, it's movies, it's media, it's great stuff. You joined us previously for our Snyder Cut review.
Feels so long ago.
It does feel so long. It feels. How many Snyder Cuts ago was that? Because that's how I measure time.
Yeah.
But I'm really happy to have you back to discuss The Suicide Squad. I want to do 2 disclosures at the top. We work for Rooster Teeth, which is a subsidiary of Warner Brothers, which is the company that made this, Warner Media. And so just keep that in mind. We just want to make sure you're aware of it. And the other disclosure is that I watch a lot of Marcus's videos and tend to agree with him, I would say 99% of the time. So this may feel like an echo chamber. And I didn't do it intentionally. I didn't know how Marcus felt about the film when I asked him to be on. But him being here, I'm pretty confident this is going to be a fun review. So now that those are out of the way, let's just jump right into it. We're talking about The Suicide Squad 2021, written and directed by James Gunn after he was fired by Disney for like 3 weeks. He did this all in 3 weeks. 132 minutes, stars Idris Elba, Margot Robbie, Viola Davis, John Cena, and Joel Kinnaman, among many, many others. I just want to toss this out to Elise. Why don't you kick off this and jump off with your thoughts?
I wanted Marcus to start so I could just be like, because he would actually like put it in an eloquent way. I love this. I love this movie. I was a little bit predisposed to love it going in because I enjoy the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. Mm-hmm. I was sold on the trailer for this. I loved the idea of James Gunn saying, I'm going to soft reboot this. I saw all the early reviews and feedback, so I was also kind of biased thinking like this is going to be a great movie, and it delivered completely. Something I think a lot about with James Gunn, and maybe you both agree or disagree, is that he's a guy that came from trauma. He came from this very kind of trauma being considered sort of the unintellectual
avant-garde
movie world, right? He came from a place where his calling card doesn't really come with a lot of prestige, I think, is maybe the external bias that he would have. And I love that he's now Hollywood's golden boy, and he's making these movies that are like critically acclaimed, and the stigma of maybe, oh, this guy came from trauma doesn't affect him. I actually think it works to his strength, because I think all the crazy weird shit that he liked putting into trauma movies, and that was his bread and butter, fuses beautifully with the comic book genre, and he's making like amazing, weird, fun stuff because of that. And it's like maybe Disney, DC, Marvel, Warner should be plumbing more directors from these weird avant-garde places. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's
Marcus,
where I'm at.
What are your broad thoughts on the film?
I like Elise. I saw the trailers and I'm like, yeah, this is gonna be good. It's a done deal. Mm-hmm. Like it with James Gunn being able to do kind of whatever he wants, and like I like the Guardians movies a lot. Like I think those are, you know, some of the best superhero movies. Like they definitely changed the trajectory of like the MCU in my opinion. Like that's kind of like the point where things kind of changed, because like before that was like Age of Ultron, and that's still kind of like a normal Marvel movie for the most part. And but when Guardians came out, I think studios were like, oh, people like weird stuff about characters that are like kind of dumb. Like before that, Rocket Raccoon would not have been like a household name, but he can take these characters and make them interesting without like, you know, like you said, he can use his kind of like strangeness from like the trauma stuff. Like people like seeing weird, pulpy, stylistic choices in movies sometimes. Like Quentin Tarantino uses like title cards and like classic movie tropes and stuff like that, and people enjoy seeing that because you don't see that all the time. And in this movie you get like a very kind of pulpy, comic booky, like kind of like trashy in a way, but like in a way that works, and I think it worked really well.
I think in your review, Marcus, you talked about how the title cards in the movie actually distract you from maybe some of the structural problems. Yeah,
like it's like normally, like if I'm reading a trade paperback of a comic and it's like, you know, issue Batman issues 500 through 506, and I'm not going to be like, oh, you know, issue 503 was kind of like slow and boring. But it felt like this was kind of like a comic book, like trade paperback. Like, you know, some chapters may not be, you know, as exciting or, you know, but they do contribute overall to the finished product. So like some of the pacing issues for me were forgiven by the fact that I was in my head like, oh, I'm like reading a comic book and this is always the new chapter where they're going to go save Harley, you know, that kind of thing.
It is interesting because we're at the point where we talk about the comic book genre, like even beyond superheroes, right? Superheroes have been around for like 4 decades or whatever in terms of film, but more maybe. When was Superman? But
a while ago.
This feels like a comic book film. Like this is someone who understands what makes comics interesting and is really trying to translate that into a screen experience, as opposed to adapt like Captain America into a movie, you know? And so I definitely agree. It felt so fun, and the paring down of the cast, I feel like you can't discuss this movie without also talking about the fact that it's like, I hesitate to use the word sequel because it almost it's a not since maybe Gremlins 2 has a movie come out that has so much disdain for the movie that it came before it, you know, like, and I know that word seems harsh, but it's like actually in there, and I kind of love it. I love how this movie is like, yeah, okay, so we're not just gonna write everything off, but we're only gonna take honestly the best bits, the only things that were worth harvesting from that first film, and then transfer it into this one. But even that, we're going to be like, you can only join this party if you're willing to let go of the other party that you were a part of. But yeah, all in all, I loved everything you guys are saying, the structural aspect of it and how it hid kind of those slow moments. I am of the broad camp that I don't think we've gotten to the point where movies are now like 2 to 2.5 hours, and they don't have to be. Elise and I started watching Pig last night, and the only other than the good reviews, the reason we started watching it is that it was 90 minutes.
I still gotta watch that.
It was between that or A Quiet Place Part 2, and we basically went with the one with the shorter runtime. And so I am totally of you can make something that's 90 minutes long and it'll totally be worth the price of admission. But this didn't really feel like it dragged in too many of the wrong places, right?
Yeah.
Question. All of the marketing for this has said it's not a sequel. Is it a sequel?
It is. Like the thing is, it is a sequel, but it's the kind of sequel where like you don't have to watch it. Like you don't have to watch the one before to totally get it. Like there's some context you may miss, but I think the beginning of the movie wraps everything up like in like that first like couple minutes. Like there's a mission, bomb in your neck, this is your commanding officer. Don't die. That's it.
Yeah.
Like, that's all you really need to know. And the movie sums it up perfectly.
Because I think if you saw this for the first time contextually, you'd understand that Harley Quinn and Rick Flag have like a history. They know each other.
Yeah.
And Captain Boomerang.
And Captain Boomerang.
Hey, Boomer.
Yeah, they make it very clear that she's done this before. This is not her first time doing one of these. And that's kind of all you need to know, really.
Yeah. I think this movie also benefited from what has been the weird 2020, 2021 marketing machine for films, which is for me, I'm like in the movie theaters every single weekend. And so you're bombarded with trailers for months. Yeah. And so ultimately you feel like you know everything that's going to happen anyway. I saw some of the trailers for this movie, but ultimately it was easier to just choose not to watch newer ones. Yeah, and that whole opening came as kind of a surprise to me. Like, I knew that he was jam packing the cast so that way they could die off in the film, right? And actually deliver on the title and the premise of it being a Suicide Squad, but not to that degree. And especially with the people, like Pete Davidson doing promo and press for this.
Yeah, it's very funny.
I wasn't expecting him to, like, within the first, spoiler alert for the first 5 minutes of the film, basically everyone you see walking there, minus Rick Flag on the right, die within the first 10 minutes in just a complete barrage of bullets and pain. And it's funny. It's great. It's perfect. It's like we're saying about how it's an extension or a sequel or something or whatever. It basically says you don't need to know what happened before, but if you do, this is more fun for you. And if you don't, you're already caught up to speed. Everyone's at the same pace, which I really liked a lot.
Yeah, I had like an idea that they would really play off on the Suicide Squad aspect and kill off a good chunk of the characters. Like when I saw that one trailer, I think it was one of the first trailers where it just like name after name after name after name. I'm like, okay, I see Nathan Fillion there, and he only shows up in stuff to die in like the first episode of the first like 5 minutes. He is not sticking around. Yeah, and I was like, but I didn't think it would happen like immediately. Like literally first 5 minutes, half of the characters on that poster are completely done for.
And this the way that they executed on it, having A team, B team, and your A team gets slaughtered, say for two of them, and then the B team emerges out of the water. They're on this exact same mission with the same directive. They're just in two different drop locations. I thought it was such a fun way of doing that. And
then the title drop, like you're like, oh no, this is what the movie's following. That's actually
it's artful.
Such a good opening.
So we're gonna open it up. So just kind of to get into the plot for anyone who's like, I have no idea what they're talking about, because that is always a concern. This movie is almost a war film. So it basically is. There's an island that they say is somewhere in South America, Corto Maltese or something, and so basically a team is sent to investigate, right? They have a lot. Their mission is very diverse, but basically sent to investigate a very suspicious thing, Project Starfish, I believe, which is some sort of laboratory experiment that's happening. And it wasn't as big a concern before, but the regime has just changed in this dictator island nation, and so they're concerned about the new leaders that are in place and how they might use this. So they're basically sending a team to go in and
it's America preserving America.
Preserving America, which is actually really fun too, because all of this breeds into letting James Gunn do what he wants to do and make like an anti-superhero film. Right? Like, because so much of like Man of Steel or any of these things, like Superman represents America. Yeah. And, if you read stuff like Red Sun, it's like, why? Because he landed 12 hours away from where he would have landed if he had been fired from Krypton, whatever. And so like this kind of puts that on its head and confronts it on its deeper themes. But then just at the top of it is just a good group of people having to learn to work together, even though they have basically nothing in common and don't necessarily work very well together. and accomplish this mission on an island. And like Elise said, there's an A team and a B team, and you don't realize you're watching the B team until about 10 minutes into the movie, when the entire B team, including Michael Rooker, who is your perspective into the film up to this point, is completely killed off. And then you're introduced to the A team.
Well, you touched on it with Guardians, Marcus. I was not familiar with any of these, I guess, anti-villains before, and that's what I loved about Guardians too, was he took these characters that I did not know existed, didn't give a shit about, and elevated them into something really fun. And yeah, did you know, like, what was your background with this?
I know King Shark, and I'm trying to think of who else is in the movie. I think I've read a comic with Bloodsport in it. Some of the thing is, like, some of these characters, like, are purposefully chosen for being kind of worthless. So, like,
Yeah.
I like the joke that, like, John Cena's character and Idris Elba, like, they're the same guy.
Oh, I love that.
They're the same dude.
Well,
and
it's
you
also
don't need to worry about the characters and what their origins are.
Yeah, it's also kind of mocking and like self-referential to the fact that I feel like Will Smith's Deadshot is also that character too.
It's the same dude.
And so it's kind of like them being like, okay, yeah, well, we made Idris Elba this new character, Bloodsport. You know, maybe Will Smith will come back in a future Suicide Squad. Who knows? But they are essentially like the same character, and we're going to have John Cena be that. Like, that worked so well. Yeah. It worked so well. And John Cena showing up for all the press in his Peacemaker costume.
Yeah, he wears the costume. It's adorable.
It's so great. I was reading that he originally offered, James Gunn originally offered the part to Dave Bautista of Peacemaker, and he said, "No, I'm going to go do Army of the Dead."
Okay, all right.
Which is like,
buddy.
all right, but
Sure,
I'm like, you know, Dave Bautista, while I think that he's really funny as Drax, I don't know that he could have pulled off the bait and switch of Peacemaker and how complicated hero that he is as well.
Dave Bautista is so dry, and that's what makes him funny. John Cena is so genuine, and that's what makes him funny. Like, I don't know how much you follow wrestling, but like when John Cena was like so popular, it was like he's in jean shorts and he's coming out rapping with chains around his neck, but then also salutes like the flag, but like the only reason he didn't fall into that, like, there's so many dead gimmicks in the world of professional wrestling. The only reason he didn't fall into that is because he's genuine. Like, somehow he can do that, and it's wild for me to think of a different version of this Peacemaker, right? Like, it's because he was perfect in it.
He really, I think he was probably what stole the show for me. Like, I've been kind of wanting John Cena to get into bigger roles and stuff like that, because I'm slightly familiar with him in wrestling, and I'm like, I like, again, like how genuine he is. I like that it doesn't matter how corny he is, he knows he's given it his all. And I think this is like the perfect kind of character for him. Like, this is the character where he gets to do the most. Like, he's basically playing, like, if John Cena was a supervillain, like, this is what he would be. And I think it works for him really well.
Yeah, and I think also as a character, again, what makes it fun, I had the exact same experience with Marvel that you did, where I feel like every single time I'm getting tired of it, like one comes in and restarts my engine. And Guardians of the Galaxy was definitely that for me, that first one, because I was like, and the trailer, to me, I never thought the trailer was funny, and I watched it, it's like, oh my gosh, this is great, and they have a great dynamic, and I love this cast. This feels like the same thing again, and maybe it's just James Gunn, but like the fact that John Cena doesn't even like know he's a villain, like, is something that you wouldn't really get in a superhero movie of any sort of traditional standard. Like, you know, like Captain America, it's very similar to Captain America in a lot of ways, but you don't think about the fact that, like, oh wait, didn't you see how he would be perceived as like a complete and horrible person for these actions that he's taking?
I think James Gunn or John Cena himself described him as douchebag Captain America.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I like that he's the one character, like, they kind of tell you why everybody got arrested, but he's like the one that they don't tell you. But as the movie goes on, you're like, okay, this guy's he's a bit too much. I kind of get why without them needing to tell me.
He has his own moral code and standards that he upholds, but then you're like, are those really the right standards and moral code? So much more fascinating than like just good guy who, you know, is just, you know, not flawed in any way.
And again, it's not all new characters. So I think we haven't talked enough about Idris Elba, who I also think is fantastic in this. It's tough because they have a lot of these big personalities. I mean, King Shark, obviously, being in this film, and it's a different interpretation of King Shark than I was familiar with. I'm mostly familiar with the Ron Funches Harley Quinn cartoon version of King Shark, who's very different. This is like he's more like a Groot type, and I was worried as soon as it started. I was like, oh, James Gunn's gonna try and go to the Groot well again, but it works. It just works. It works so well.
But I do think that Groot, Weasel, King Shark are all in that camp of like pathetic anthropomorphic like whatever, where like King Shark, anytime that he was doing or saying anything, I was just like gushing over it, saying he just wants to be a part of things. He just wants to like, it's like James Gunn has this ability to like personify and imbue personality into what is almost close to an inanimate object. Like this dumb as a doornail shark is like, he's so amazing. He's great.
Yeah. I think like Groot is more of kind of like a prop most of the time. Like he's talking, but only one character can really understand what he's saying, and that does give personality to the character. But I mean, like in Guardians 1, Groot doesn't really, you know, he does things for the characters, but he doesn't have a character really. You don't know what he likes and what he wants. Whereas King Shark like is a character. Like he says sort of more lines, but with those with like with his mannerisms and stuff, you get a lot of character out of him.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, him reading the book upside down.
Yeah, that's the first scene you see of him.
Yeah, and you're like, okay, I know exactly what this is. This is some character that somehow fell into a vat of waste or something, gained consciousness, and he wants to be regarded a certain way, but doesn't have the intellect to meet that expectation. And like, it's just, it's beautiful. It's perfect.
Yeah.
I like how. No, sorry, you go ahead.
No, I was gonna. Yes, agree.
I like the kind of with that. This is all in the first few minutes. Like when you see a character within like 30 seconds, you will understand that character for the most part. And contrasted with like the first Suicide Squad, where we have like 5-minute long like flashback montage scenes that don't really even teach us anything about the character. It just shows us something they did one time. It's just in such a short amount of time, this movie can sum up a character, and
Who
that's
was
it. You're on board.
Slipknot? You know?
Who was Slipknot? I still love. Let's can we divert and talk about Suicide Squad 2016 just so briefly? Actually, we're gonna take a quick break, and then we'll be back, and we're gonna I promise we're only gonna talk about it for a little bit. We're gonna get back to the new one. I just cannot resist. So we'll be right back. This episode of Filmhaus is brought to you by Purple. I don't know about you, I love the summer, but sometimes it's a little hard to get a good night's rest. Maybe I wake up at 3 a.m. because my neighbors are throwing a party. They shouldn't be doing that. It's irresponsible. Or more likely, it's because it's too hot and my bed has become a disgusting swamp. But with a Purple mattress, it'll help you sleep like an angel on the clouds. It'll stay cool and comfortable no matter how infernally hot it is outside, because only Purple mattress has the Grid, a design so fancy it's capitalized. The Grid is a ventilated design that lets air flow right through your mattress or pillow. The Grid keeps you cool, but it's also supportive for your back and legs, and yet it still cushions everything you want cushioned: your shoulders, your hips, your neck. You feel like you're just lying on a conforming, wonderful, cool thing. Honestly, the Grid makes a big difference. It seems silly, and I know it sounds like corporate speak, but the ability for air to keep flowing through the things that you put your head on, or for me, I love to have a pillow between my knees. It just keeps things cool. It also feels sciencey, which I kind of like, you know? I don't want a pillow that has feathers in it. I want a science pillow, okay? What does Albert Einstein sleep on? That's what I'm looking for. Purple is comfort reinvented. Right now, you'll get 10% off any order of $200 or more. Go to purple.com/filmhouse and use promo code Filmhaus. That's purple.com/filmhouse. Promo code Filmhouse for 10% off any order of $200 or more. Purple.com/filmhouse. Promo code Filmhouse. Check the terms, they apply. Okay, the shortest we can ever discuss this movie. Before we started, I talked about how there's only a handful of films that are on my this is like the worst thing I've ever seen. Suicide Squad 2016 is perpetually for me one of the worst movies I've ever seen. It was a miserable experience, even though the theater was perfect. It was a miserable experience. I was unhappy the whole time, and I felt so good that in your review you gave it an unprecedented 1 out of 10.
Yes.
But it's so funny because now we have two movies that have the same name, which are trying to achieve the same goals, and one does everything wrong and the other does most everything. I would say 90% of things right. It's just, they should show these two in film studies classes because they are just like, they could not be better opposites of each other.
Yeah, they are almost complete opposites. I was going, when I was editing my review for the new one, I went and got some clips from the old one, and like just looking at them side by side, like one is dark and disgusting and looks awful and has like, if you press play on that clip, it's not going to be cut properly. And then one is, it has color and life and energy in the performances. It's so baffling that they're basically like, I would say that I think the new one isn't like, that other movie sucks. It sucks. It's horrible.
Oh, yeah.
Like it does like bring things up that you do need to know. Like you have to have knowledge of the first movie, and they're not like completely shitting on the other movie. But the fact that if you watch them back to back, it is going to be very, very strange.
Yeah. It feels like a stand-up comedian, like a really amazing, poignant, philosophical stand-up comedian, like making fun of something on stage where it isn't just put downs, like it isn't insults, but it's like, we have to acknowledge how terrible this is because, you know, the Suicide Squad 2016, it doesn't have characters.
Nope.
It has pastiches of characters that you don't know what their wants or their needs are, and they often conflict with themselves from scene to scene. It doesn't have a setting. It takes place in city.
Oh yeah.
It starts, I believe, in like Louisiana, but then it moves to city, and then it's just in city, right? And so this one is like, you know, the people, the wants and needs of the people.
Okay, James, we didn't have Batman.
It did have two scenes.
And this movie doesn't have Batman. It doesn't have Joker. It doesn't have any of the heroes that I know and love.
But even Batman's relationship to all of them was very unclear.
Batman didn't land on a car in this one.
Yeah, he didn't land on a car.
They mention Batman because doesn't Bloodsport, didn't he shot him with the they mentioned Superman because Bloodsport shot Superman with a kryptonite bullet.
Yeah.
And I went, Batman.
Which honestly is if you think about the two and you're comparing the two, Bloodsport is in jail because he shot a kryptonite bullet into Superman. You're like, oh shit, like that's intimidating. Whereas Deadshot gets grabbed in an alley
after shopping at Macy's. He just gets.
That's how they're telling the audience like how you should feel about one or the other. Of course, I have to mention almost wanted to tweet at James Gunn and ask if it is canon that Killer Croc was watching BET while the events of the new movie were taking place, because again, not one character at least had a want, and that's Killer Croc, and it was BET. But they could not be any different. But what I love about it, I almost am happy that this other movie exists, because for the longest time I was really upset because it's terrible, and then it made like $1 billion. Oh
my God, yeah. People love this movie. Like people will watch it on purpose.
it's horrible. And then even the Snyder Cut acknowledged that it existed. Like, I just wanted it to just go away and die. But now I'm okay with it existing because of the new one, because I think what we're talking about, there's characters that come back. And I think those characters, they pick and choose the ones that we liked. Captain Boomerang was like a nothing, but I didn't necessarily have issues with him. I didn't know why he was there, but I didn't necessarily have issues with him being there. He didn't open his mouth and directly contradict himself like other characters did. And then also I felt bad for Joel Kinnaman because, you know, he tried what he could do with Rick Flag. And then, of course, we have Margot Robbie, who is now Harley Quinn. And so James Gunn, it looks like he watched those, brought these into the new one and said, what can we do to, of course, Jared Leto.
This shot is so funny because like the characters in this that matter in the new movie are very, very few.
Yeah. We're looking at a cast photo for the Suicide Squad 2016. But by basically the midpoint of the new Suicide Squad, these characters all have like goals, and they have wants and needs, and they've also subverted the expectations that they were given in the previous one. Obviously, Harley Quinn had Birds of Prey to kind of develop a little bit, but I don't know that she ever truly shook off the gunk from Suicide Squad until the scene where she is taken to the new dictator. And he basically wines and dines her, and it's this romantic montage of them like finding love together. And she's like, "Oh my gosh!" And as a viewer, I'm thinking, really, she's doing this again? Like after all this, she's doing this again. And then he's like, "Will you marry me?" And she's like, "Sure." And they bang, and then he basically reveals his plan of how he wants to use this super weapon for world domination, and then boom, he gets shot. Up to this point, the main villain his chest is blown out, and he's shot by this massive gun, and she's like, "Ooh, that's a red flag."
That's a red flag. I loved this Harley Quinn. I thought it was the best one yet. I wanted to like Birds of Prey more than I think I did. Mm-hmm. And I love that Harley Quinn, of course, her story is that she gets captured, but then falls into this weird hyper romance with a dictator of the very place that they're meant to infiltrate. And all the signaling of her is completely different, right? She's got like her cool clown jacket instead of Daddy's little monster. Mm-hmm. She's not Joker's accessory anymore. She's kind of just flying in, doing her own thing. Saving herself. Like I loved it. Mm-hmm. I did find that in terms of pacing, her kind of like, little off story it did feel a little bit weird. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But again, like Marcus was talking about it feeling more comic book and like issues. I just kind of went along for the ride, and it didn't matter.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That was the point of the movie where I was like as it was going, I'm like, I know this is going somewhere, but I'm not feeling where it's going yet. But it has a good payoff. So I kind of like, you forgive it because this movie's really good at surprising you. I think that's one thing that I really appreciate about the movie is that, especially with characters that are expendable and you don't know who's going to die, like in fight scenes between two characters, you're like, I have no idea how this is going to turn out. I don't know what this movie is going to throw at me because this isn't like Superman. Like in a Superman movie, like, Superman probably will be okay. I mean, actually, Superman dies a lot in his movies, but like in a Batman movie or a Spider-Man movie, you're like, there's no tension that the main character is going to just die. Mm-hmm. And this movie, it keeps you kind of engaged with like, this is kind of like in the first 5 minutes, half the characters already died. The characters that I'm following, I can't guarantee their safety in my own head. Mm-hmm. And
I think it needed the characters to not be safe and to all be considered collateral because the base bones plot really wasn't anything so innovative or new. Like the Project Starfish, Starro the Conqueror, the Thinker, while all kind of fun and having their own like James Gunn spin on them, it's not really that different from like an Ozymandias having a giant squid
Yeah.
that he can like teleport. Like it really, I liked Starro, and I liked, that his final line of, I was happier looking at the stars,
Yeah.
or whatever. I was like, oh, I really enjoy this. But it didn't really feel like anything so new, which was totally fine.
Yeah. It at the very least for me was a diversion from what is become the standard, which
I know
is
what he's gonna say.
You're gonna say is that every single enemy in the Marvel universe is a dark reflection of the hero, like constantly.
Yeah.
And even in the TV shows, like, the antagonist of the actual antagonist of Loki is Loki.
Yep.
Like it's like literally at that point. And it doesn't ruin them for me, but it's definitely something that I'm tired of seeing. Like, I don't want to see a palette swap fight a palette swap in a CG battle at the end. And so, whereas Starro is more like the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man than he is an actual villain, it made for a more exciting climax because it wasn't just Dark Harley Quinn or, it wasn't even like Peacemaker versus Bloodshot, right? Or
Yep.
Bloodsport. Sorry, there's too many. Bloodsport. It wasn't even that, right? Which kind of would have been like, okay, there's one's a reflection of the other. It knew that and it avoided it specifically. Like they barely have a confrontation. Yeah. And then they were like, all right, now let's fight our Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. And I was so relieved because that to me is just more compelling.
And I love that the giant space starfish has more character than the Enchantress, who is, a character that is supposed to be a character, but we don't know anything about her for the whole movie. But we get more about the starfish is more of like even just that last line. Like that last line is like a very like James Gunn, like every character is going to be sympathetic, even the giant starfish that just killed thousands of people.
Yeah.
I was curious what you thought about Polka-Dot Man, specifically in regards to the whole mother, obsession and
I think the movie thought
trauma.
It was funnier than it was.
I agree. That's exactly because I kind of, when he was sort of describing like his mother subjecting he and his siblings to all that, and then they do the reveal of, this is all he sees. I was like, even for me, this is a little dark. I don't get the fun and games of this.
Yeah. And just like this shot here holds for like a really long time. They want you to sit and laugh in the theater for a minute. Yeah. And I was like, I get that it's funny, it's funny because it shows up like 3 times, rule 3s. But the movie does think it's funnier than it is, unfortunately.
Yeah, I would say the one that I did enjoy when he's dancing and the camera spins around and then like because it's kind of like not a blink and you'll miss it. This one is definitely in your face where he sees them as all the different characters of the Suicide Squad in the jungle. But the other one feels kind of like it's all them. Like you're not looking at the faces in the crowd, and if you are, you kind of see that it's his mother.
Yeah.
All of that though is kind of what you're talking about, where like the character. No matter who they are, how disposable they are, how expendable they are, they have things that they're going through and they're dealing with. Yeah. And I love it, and I hate to keep comparing it back to the 2016 version, but none of those characters seem to be dealing with anything really like that even none of it comes even close to this. And so, like you said, that final line from Starro, this Polka-Dot Man, who would have thought you'd enjoy Polka-Dot Man? Even Milton.
Oh yeah, Milton.
Which was like a fun stuff like because at a certain point there's a character who they meet up through this resistance group. And then he basically just drives them into the Capitol so that way they can try and break into this place. But then you just notice that he's with them. Like if you're not paying attention, you probably won't see him. But like it's like, oh, they're running into a building. He doesn't speak to any of them, but like in group shots, he's always there. And then at a certain point, he just like gets, I think, like just shot and killed. And then one of the characters goes, "Oh no, they killed Milton," and everyone else is like, "Who?" And it's just it's such a great number one Harley Quinn moment, but it also says something about like every character on screen has purpose. Back to the 2016 version, they go into city with like a whole group of other soldiers. And it's unclear why, because they're supposed to be the Suicide Squad, right? You send in the expendable ones and not the people who aren't expendable. So why do they have soldiers? And those guys get killed off so they can keep the other characters alive. And it's just such a funny counterpoint to that.
Question for you, Marcus, because the collars, you know, it's an issue at the beginning, it's an issue at the end, but we don't really hear about the collars throughout the movie. Harley Quinn loses hers. Collars? How did you feel about them as a device in this? Because I loved it. I loved that it wasn't the big focal point of this movie, that they've got these collars on. We got to hear about the collars all the time.
They have the thing shot into their neck, right?
Yeah.
Isn't it implanted?
It is, yeah.
So
the thing is, they said the collars were like, Polka-Dot Man has a collar because of his power dampening.
His power, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But yeah, I forgot that some characters also have collars. I guess, maybe everybody just has a collar.
I just felt like in the first one, it was like always thinking about these stupid fucking collars. And it's like, who cares?
Oh, yeah.
And in this one, I'm like, just,
Yeah. The first one constantly has to remind you that there's some sort of time bomb because the characters don't have a reason to be participating. So they have to constantly reiterate, hey, Rick Flag can press a button and then you can die in a second. And it's like, all right, well, he has his back turned and you could shoot him 1,000 times before he would ever reach for this button. The eye in the sky. I do think we talked a little bit about how it has this comic book pacing and tends to go on different asides. And I agree with you that like when you're like, okay, now let's move with the Suicide Squad. And it's like, hold on, we're actually going to check in on Harley for about 12 minutes or something like that. It's like kind of jarring. They kind of do that again with the Amanda Waller story because Viola Davis is great, but that whole bureaucracy of the thing isn't really interesting.
No.
And there is a point where they go, oh no, their mic's cut out. And then they just, so that way the characters can just have whatever discussions that they want to without fear of like repercussion from Amanda Waller, who's like a sociopath.
Yeah.
And then it conveniently comes back in during the climax of the film when things are supposed to be more urgent or whatever. And it feels kind of like, hey, we're trying to clean up that mess that we have from the previous film. There's like things that we have to work within the confines of, but we're just going to brush them aside when they're inconvenient and then bring them back in when they are. So
I think all the stuff from like the previous movie is used in this is used in a way that is more appropriate. Like Amanda Waller, like that performance is very good. So she gets to still be the same character. She's the only character that's kind of like the same exact character. Like even Rick Flag, like he's kind of a sillier version of himself. And he's, more charismatic and more likable, but she is the same person. If anything, she's, a little less violent because she's like murdering like her coworkers in the first one, but like she is the same person. And they get to still have that performance while having her kind of contrast with the rest of the stuff that's going on. Her being super serious and stoic is funnier because she's talking to a giant shark that is a moron. So it works better, but it is still like kind of just the same stuff that we already had.
This episode of Filmhaus is brought to you by Freshly. Who says eating healthy has to require a lot of work? I know that it doesn't. Freshly's meals are chef-made, they're nutrient-packed, and they are delicious. And you don't even have to cook them. At Freshly.com, you can choose from over 30 satisfying, better-for-you meals like steak peppercorn, sausage baked penne, or their chicken pesto bowl, which sounds delicious to me. Freshly has a variety of plans and meals to pick from that work for differing dietary needs, preferences, tastes, and family size. You think you have this association of popping something in the microwave or getting some sort of pre-made meal and it not being, number one, delicious or nutritious, but Freshly has both of those things. Right now, Freshly is offering our listeners $40 off your first 2 orders when you go to freshly.com/filmhouse. Stop stressing about dinner. Go to freshly.com/filmhouse for $40 off your first 2 orders. That's freshly.com/filmhouse for $40 off your first 2 orders.
The thing about it too is we haven't even really talked about Ratcatcher 2. Like there's a lot of characters that are in this that like we haven't even talked about. The Thinker. I love when you just throw in weird, like it's basically a normal like dictator, South American dictatorship or whatever, and then there's also just a guy who has nodes in his head and he's at the bar and no one really talks about it. Like it paints a picture of a superhero world that's way more compelling than a lot of movies do, where it's like superheroes, oh, they fly through the sky. And I'm like, well, what about the postman? Like, what does he think of, you know, Captain America knocking down giant helicarriers or whatever? Like it kind of paints a much more colorful world. And I'm totally down for it just as a whole.
Yeah. And like the father figure relationship between the Ratcatcher and Bloodsport, like you really buy. It doesn't feel contrived in any way, especially, you know, given his relationship with his daughter. Yeah. None of it feels put on in any way.
Yeah. And all the traits of these characters, like even like the thing with the mom and Polka-Dot Man, like it's played, it's stretched out maybe a little more than it needs to be, but that is a thing you can latch onto with that character. Whereas like, again, to reference the original, like the pink unicorns for Boomerang.
Oh, right.
Like,
yeah.
what does that, what does it really matter? Like,
oh, God.
I'll take, you know, his mom, the Polka-Dot Man's mom showing up over maybe a shot of a pink unicorn that doesn't amount to anything and doesn't do anything for the character.
Well, also they don't even like show, like it's, you know, obviously they say show don't tell, but this is like the further version of tell, which is like read, you know, like it's like attributes, like it like gives you his attributes, and that's like the thing, because, and you know when you're doing it because after the fact they realize they didn't have any of that stuff, and so they're like, oh, we forgot to tell the audience that this is important to them. How do we do that?
This is the first movie in a while where I want to watch it again almost immediately because it's pretty dense and there's a lot of texture. Yeah. There's a lot of those just kind of one lines or little asides that you maybe aren't going to get on the first viewing too. It's just, there's like so much in it. Every line has significance. Every character has a point. Like the pink unicorns thing, I totally forgot about because it was imagery without any function to the story or anything, or even to the character. Like, man, it's just like this shot of her in the window, like, oh God.
Taika Waititi cameo
as her dad.
Yeah.
There's a lot to the movie, and I also was like, oh, the second I got it, I'm like, I want to watch this again, and I watched it while I was editing like my video for it, and I'm catching up on, like, I have the subtitles on now, so I can see lines that I'm like, I did not hear that line before. That's a funny line.
Yeah, it's definitely jam packed, and it's again, it's frustrating because it shares a name with something that is the opposite of it. Yeah. And it also exists in a much more chaotic cinematic universe. It's probably the only reason it is able to exist at all. I think that's why we have situations where it's like, oh my gosh, like Wonder Woman was really good. Wonder Woman 84 wasn't good. Aquaman was pretty fun. Like Suicide Squad was terrible. Yeah. Suicide Squad was good. Like it, you know, I think say what you will about the DC cinematic universe, you're more likely to get some of these things because it's like you're playing with the Bad News Bears as opposed it's honestly, this is a better analogy. This is Helen Hunt's team in Twister versus Carrie Elwes' team in Twister. They got a whole grab bag of stuff. Some of them just love to eat chips and drink Pepsi or whatever. But then the others are super geniuses. And then with Carrie Elwes' team, they all drive the same black van and stuff. I still enjoy the Marvel movies, but I just think this is just what you're going to get when you allow things to get mixed up.
Yeah.
Something I need to like point out, because I didn't realize it until I read it after seeing the movie, but then it made everything make sense. This was the first movie that John Murphy scored since Kick-Ass. And you know John Murphy because he wrote Adagio in D minor, which you've heard in everything. Kick-Ass, The Walking Dead, Sunshine. It's that. And there was a point watching Suicide Squad where these notes of the song started playing, and I went, "Oh God, does he have Adagio in D minor in this? Is he gonna use that? Like, that song's been used in everything. I love it. It sets a tone and a mood immediately." But then it changed over, and I went, "Oh, okay, yeah. Of course, why would he? Of course he wouldn't. James Goodwin, he would know. And now I'm like, oh, it was John Murphy.
Yeah,
like,
it was close.
And he got him.
Yeah,
he fucking got him.
Fucking got him.
I don't know. I don't know if it's hard to get John Murphy. I don't really know. But I love that. I love that.
Yeah. Well, that's another thing too. I mean, we'll probably wrap this up in just a minute, but like the movie, it acknowledges the old one, because the old one is just jam packed full of licensed music, right?
Oh yeah.
And it means nothing. It just means. I remember when I saw that in theaters, someone that I was with got up to go to the bathroom, and by the time they came back, three different licensed tracks had played. It was like, he missed. Will the real Slim Shadys please stand up? Like, all of these things were in there, and they're just
it was turbulent.
They don't make any sense. They don't make any sense why they're there. And it's almost, this is just a little aside. Did you watch Loki?
Yeah, I've seen it.
Marcus, that one thing that has "We Need a Hero" at the beginning of the episode during a fight scene.
I don't remember that.
They were like in a tent, and it plays "We Need a
you're
Hero."
Right. Yeah,
and it doesn't make any sense because it's like not the song has a pretty clear theme, but the scene doesn't match at all, and it's weird. It doesn't feel like that in this movie. It feels like they do use licensed tracks, and it's generally purposeful, but they also have a great score. And it's forgivable if you're going to use those for certain moments if there's other things that are happening and it's not playing "Will the Real Slim Shady Please Stand Up" while Harley Quinn is running down that hallway with flowers and stuff popping out, right? Yeah. Like, you can get away with those things for that reason. I don't want to drag this on too long because I feel like, the last thing we want is people saying that this podcast felt like a comic book, too many issues. So I just want to open it up for, some final thoughts. Elise.
Among my final thoughts, I'd like to issue a retraction. It has come to my attention that Starro was the first ever villain in the Justice League comics, which I did not know.
I didn't even know.
I considered Starro to be a bit of a trope, but now I'm wondering if Starro was the one that started it all.
Starro was the original.
That's interesting.
Maybe.
Okay. I don't think that requires a retraction. It's just clarity.
It's a retraction. The internet's going to eat me alive.
All right. Yeah. The Starro defenders.
No, I want to watch this. I want to watch this again this week. Like, it's dense. It's fun. James Gunn, he has a way, and I hope he never feels his creative juices get bled dry.
Yeah.
Also, he did this movie with very little studio oversight, as he tells it. So let good directors, auteurs make movies.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think if DC movies keep doing this and like straying away from trying to make the Justice League stuff work, just have fun with it. But also, like you said, I would like to make sure James Gunn doesn't get like overused or overworked, because like he's kind of like he has a good track record now, like with superhero movies, and he's working for both studios. So I feel like the Guardians, our characters are kind of getting a little, I'm tired of them in some scenes. I'm like, okay, I get James Gunn, funny Guardian characters in space. I want to see, more stuff that lets him kind of do whatever he wants to do. Because this is like you said, no tampering, and you can feel that like he gets to do whatever he wants.
I wonder if DCWB have ever approached him about being their Kevin Feige architect of the DC map. like kind of what I think Zack Snyder was originally supposed to be.
Yeah.
I wonder if they've ever been like James Gunn, BR Feige.
I could see that. I could see them doing that. Like if that news came out like next week, I'd be like, yeah, that makes sense.
I don't think they'd ever pull that trigger though. They're so scatterbrained about what they want. Everything that they want changes like as the seasons change.
Yeah, and all their movies that are good, like that people would say are good, like Joker and this, like, and even like people liked the Snyder Cut for the most part, but they're all things that like are on their own. You can't make a franchise out of the Joker. You can't make a franchise out of a movie that is the director cut of the movie that actually came out. Like they're kind of in a weird position.
I loved Aquaman.
Yeah.
And Jason Momoa, he came out recently to comment on the, celebrities saying, "Oh, I don't shower. I shower 3 times a day. I'm The Rock." And because someone said Jason Momoa didn't shower, and he was like, "Dude, I'm Aquaman. I'm in the water all the time." And I was like, "That's not a response. That is not a response."
What are you hiding?
Being in the ocean does not count as a bath.
It does not count as a bath. Trust
But I
me.
love the movie.
I definitely think that this is going to be. I'm not expecting a world where we get a bunch of these, and I also think that would be overwhelming too. But I am glad that I feel like I can sit back and relax as James Gunn, once every handful of years, comes out with a home run swing for a tired, exhausted genre. We also didn't even get to mention Weasel, who also stole every scene that Weasel was in. I was happy to see Weasel survive in the post credits, but also is a little sad because the moment you know what this movie is when Weasel falls into the water and then Savant pulls him out and goes, "He's dead." like it's just immediately like you immediately
so
get
funny.
It sets the tone for everything, and you immediately like, I know what this movie's gonna be. It's just a great moment.
So funny.
Yeah.
And there he is. There's Weasel. Just a great character.
The main character.
Love Weasel.
Weasel's dead.
But yeah, thank you so much, Marcus, for coming
Thanks,
on
Marcus.
Thank you.
and
Thanks for
discussing
having me.
this film. I'm glad, again, like I said, Echo Chamber. I had a feeling we'd all be on the same page. 1 out of 10 for Suicide Squad. Unprecedented.
That's
and
right.
It's one of the worst movies ever made. And yeah, Marcus, where can people find more of you?
I'm on YouTube as the Cosmonaut Variety Hour. We also have a podcast called Cosmonaut Tabletop where we play tabletop games like D&D and stuff like that.
Ooh.
And I'm on Twitter at Cosmonaut Marcus.
Hey,
And you guys have a Patreon too, right?
Yes.
Because you make really great content that sometimes gets claimed or whatever.
Oh, yeah, that's true. If anybody wants to support us, we're on Patreon at Cosmonaut Variety Hour. Yeah, I think it's nothing different about the URL. It's probably the same thing.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to invite myself onto your tabletop show, but if you're ever strapped for gas, let me know.
Hey, okay, we'll talk about
Just
that.
did.
Yeah, let me know. And then Elise Williams, thank you so much.
Thank you, James, for having me.
And just a little bit of housekeeping. Just so you guys know, one of the reasons we wanted this review to be special with Marcus is because Filmhaus will be coming to an end in a couple weeks. We're pulling the show back. We're going to start integrating some of those film discussions into our regular podcast. But we are going out with a explosive bang. We are going to do a 2-part film franchise war. We've done our brackets before. They've been zany. They've been crazy. This one's going to be the biggest one we've ever done. The largest film franchises on the planet, in at least Western film, are going to be battling with each other to figure out which is the best film franchise of all time. I think there's 64 franchises that we're going to be debating against. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be 2 parts. We hope you guys come and check it out. Thank you, everybody, for watching and supporting, and we will catch you next time.